I'm Matt Ober from Social Leverage. And I'm panicked about the things I hear about Howard Lindzen are actually true.
Hey, Howie!
Welcome.
Well, thank you. You too. Welcome to you too. To your show.
So, how you feeling? You missed a complete event. You've been sick for months on end.
Yes, and it pisses me off to no end.
Say you were just a regular employee of a company, and you behaved and disappeared for as often as you do. Would you be shocked if people had changed the locks and said we've replaced you? Because it's been bantered about the office. But of course, it's always, I can't work with somebody that's not this K-Nut, Newt, as my guests call him.
There we go.
So how's the fam? How's everybody?
Everyone's good.
You look, and I never like to say anything nice about you, but you look fantastic.
Well, thank you.
That's all relative to me. And since you're older than me, it pains me to say this, but it's not a blemish on you. For a guy who smoked and drank and sat in the sun just as often as me,
dude, it's just
I find that I would like to know who the doctor is.
It's just Viking Nordic genes, man. That's what it is.
Yeah. The average death age in Norway is like 10 years younger. So you're doing something, and I will find out. Because there's a lot of missed days on the calendar. There's a lot of X's on the Canute calendar.
I'm working.
Do you like the new studio?
I love the new studio. Of course I did. I built it myself.
And what about, it's fantastic. People come in here and they go, I want to see it, and they're blown away.
They are.
I go, it's just foam.
Oh.
It's like a Nerf room with microphones.
It's foam heaven.
It is foam rela. Called foam rela.
You just made that up. Yep.
By the way.
Yes.
We have a really fun guest on the show.
Awesome.
Big brain, little body, but a huge brain. And a really good friend of mine, and we laugh about everything. But now we're laughing on the same team, which is always good. You know, when these people that are smarter than you never think you can work with them. Social Leverage has been a small team for forever. You know that.
Yep.
And not because we don't play well with others, even though we don't play well with others. That's not the main reason. But I don't know. It's worked. You know, it's kind of like a band. But there's just, as we've gotten older and wiser and slower and spend a lot more time in the bathroom, so that's just less to do during the day, we've needed to upgrade the team. We needed to replace ourselves at Social Leverage. We need to think about the future as the surface of tech expands and the world moves out of San Francisco a little bit in China and Russia, etc. The engineer havens and town havens to the new parts of the world. The world is changing, Canute. I don't know if you've noticed.
Really? I know I haven't noticed
and
much.
And with that change comes changes at Social Leverage. So we recently brought on an old friend of ours, Matt Ober, who, I don't want him to spend time talking about his background. I want to talk about the future and what he's doing with us. So he was introduced to me, I forget. Maybe he cold called me, or maybe he'll tell us that. I don't remember. But in my 40s at some point, he came by Stocktwits and taught us a few things while he was at WorldQuant. He was running investments, private market investments, and doing some data stuff at WorldQuant, which is a huge quant fund, one of the top 5 biggest. And then went over to work with Dan Loeb at the $20 billion Third Point Capital.
Ooh.
Yes. And you know what? I don't even know what 20 billion, that's pretty cool. Social Leverage is under 500 million, so we've got a long way to go. But Matt's seen what it's like inside the belly of a $20 billion hedge fund.
Mm-hmm.
He never tells me anything. But, and I've been there, and there's some funny stories about pitching there. But anyway, so Matt is our resident GP now, living in New York. Gives us feet on the ground in New York, and a big brain as web evolves. The next web evolves into crypto. They call it Web3, but it's just the next web. Crypto, tokens, NFTs, infrastructure, credit. Those things that I'm too old to read up on. I don't want to get ripped off. So we said, bring on Matt. And Matt was open to the change. He's also started his own company. We'll talk a little bit about that, which we are excited about, having people on our team that have companies. We think people can multitask. Jack did it. He's got 7 or 8 public companies running. Mm-hmm. And so let's bring on Matt Ober. Matt, you're here.
Howard, how are you?
Hey, buddy.
Hey.
He sounds excited, Knut.
I know.
It sounded like he had an hour off, and we fucked him.
He fell asleep during the intro. That was the problem.
So tell me a couple things, Matt. You have 2 kids.
2 kids under 2.
2 kids under 2. Did someone put a gun to your head, or that's a free will decision? Because you sound upset about the decision.
We figured if we're going to have 1, we might as well have 2 and get things moving along.
And would you say, is having a person under 2 easier or harder than working with Dan Loeb? Quick yes or no. We're getting right to the hard-hitting question.
Kids are harder.
Kids are harder. And who spends more time on their hair, a 2-year-old or Dan Loeb?
Good question. I don't even remember what Dan's hair looks like.
Well, I do, because you introduced us, and I could not stop staring at the perfect coif. So tell me, it sounds like you've done some research about me and still came on to be a general partner. What are some of the things that I've done so far that have just made you roll your eyes? Is there something that stands out in the way we do business? And we've been in so many meetings and weird meals and funny conversations. Or anything that really stands out of why social leverage?
I think signing up to work with you know what you're getting, right? It's like 24 hours, 7 days a week, always having new ideas, and it doesn't matter time or day. So it's not really different than my past 15 years. It's just you're doing it with the early stage startups, talking to the Larry Davids of the world, the Cenas of FTX. I mean, I think that social leverage is just seeing more of the vision of what does the next 10 years look like versus living right now.
Yeah. What drove you down the hedge fund path as a kid? What did you do as a kid? What was the growing up as Matt Ober?
I think I started out at Bloomberg early in my career, and I was like, why are these guys on the other side of the terminal that much smarter than anybody else? And I was like, I should be sitting in that seat. And fighting my way to get there, I ended up getting a job at WorldQuant randomly from answering a Craigslist posting. And from there, I was on the other side for 12 years before I joined Social Leverage. So I think it was the challenge of what's so difficult about a hedge fund and what does it take to get there, and I just wanted to experience it.
So is WorldQuant doing that as like a tactic to see, because they're looking for people that read Craigslist because they may be a different type of thinker? Why were they advertising on Craigslist?
Honestly, no idea. I think 15 years ago, small hedge funds were posting jobs on Craigslist because it was cheap.
Huh.
And their job posting seemed fake, but I think at that point I was just applying to get an interview, and it ended up being obviously one of the largest quantitative hedge funds in the world. I mean, at that time it was smaller, but they definitely didn't seem like the type of company that should be there.
Do you consider yourself a quant? Because I see you more as like a creative brain.
I don't think I'm the quant. I think I'm the guy that can work with the quants.
And what do you think, what does that mean? Because you now work with one of the biggest quant shops in the world. So what does that mean?
I mean, I think that you have people that are extremely talented on the engineering side at lots of different companies, but they need ideas on what should we be doing, what should we be implementing, how do we get the business side of things going, and I think we were really good at WorldQuant bringing on the best of talent and challenging them with the hardest problems. So I was tasked there of how do we grow the business from 60 to 600 people, and the whole vision there was if we can consume or buy more data than anybody else in the world, we can manage more money.
Interesting.
And part of that thesis was having the best people around the world too. So it was kind of how do you get the best PhDs in the world? How do you open up offices in some of the furthest countries around the world? And then how do you acquire all of this data?
And so they had the simple premise, you had the simple premise, more, better. I always say it's not about information overload, but filter failure. So you were just saying, as long as we have all the data, we can filter better than anybody. Is that basically it?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like, if you think about Google has all this information and how powerful that is, we kind of had this thesis, if we can buy more data or consume more data from the internet than anybody else in the world, store it, and then allow our PhD researchers to do analysis on it, we can create more strategies, manage more money, perform better than everybody else.
Huh. And so was it fun right away, or what? Like, how did you end up at the ultimate job within the firm? Like, what was the track?
Yeah, I think it was at the beginning, it was kind of, we didn't know what we were doing. I think the founder there, Igor, is brilliant. He definitely cleared away paths when people had ideas. So anybody that was slowing us down was slowly let go. And we got to this point where, every year he was like, how can we do 10x? So it became a lot of fun traveling around the world, striking deals, meeting you at StockTwits. And then ultimately everything that we pitched, he was like, let's give it a shot. So I think it was like a lot of experimentation. One thing was we started WorldQuant Ventures. So we said, we meet all these great, fascinating companies, these amazing people. We should be investing in them privately as well. So that happened a dozen different times for different businesses, and he always was game for trying it out.
So that was your sneaky edge. You got to see inside the hedge fund, but learn the startup business, right? And what was the biggest disconnect or the biggest mistake that you guys were making early on in doing that? Because you had a good eye. So what did you learn? Because those are completely different types of investing.
Yeah, I think what we learned is being early but not being hands-on with companies is difficult, right? Like we invested as early as Social Leverage does, but we weren't as hands-on.
Correct.
Joining the board or doing everything. So, we would consume the data from them and give them some feedback, but that's not what a startup needs right away. And I also think that looking back on it, hedge funds aren't the best clients for people when it comes to selling data, or it shouldn't be their only business is what I would say.
Correct.
So it's one small revenue stream.
Yeah, I got sidetracked and excited because I'm an older person about revenue, and it wasn't your fault. It's like I should have been smarter and said, hey, I appreciate the offer, but we're heads down growing, and we'll worry about revenue later. It's really interesting.
Yeah, or if it's not a lot of lift for the company. I always say, like, if you're looking to sell just to hedge funds, it's a limited market and it's really difficult.
No, that's good advice, and you're always free to share that with people, which I love. I mean, one thing I like about us is we're just giving straight poop. Like, we've been in the trenches for 30 years. Between us, 40 years. We are trying to give people. We're trying to stop people from making the same mistakes with the rabbit holes. There's good rabbit holes and there's bad rabbit holes. Most of them are bad. So you got to be really careful about the rabbit holes you choose.
Yeah, share the mistakes we've made or the things we've seen, and like try and keep people from going down those same rabbit holes.
And what now? It's probably been 7 or 8, 9 years. How many investments did WorldQuant Ventures do when you were doing it?
When I was there, we probably crossed 50 investments. I think Steve Lau is still there running it. He's been phenomenal expanding the business there. They're
he's great.
probably, if I remember, crossed 200 investments. They were early in Genies, which I know just did a big round. They were early in Data Miner. A lot of data and technology businesses that have been acquired or have merged. So they've done well, but always smaller checks.
And what was is that what you just decided you love more? Because you didn't do anything about that itch right away. So how does the third point thing come along?
Yeah, so I was at WorldQuant for a while. I was loving the early stage stuff. And I think at WorldQuant, we'd gotten really big at that point. And I was approached by a recruiter that said that Dan Loeb at Third Point was thinking about building a data science team to, enhance what they were doing there. And over, probably a 9-month period, we discussed what does that really look like. And I think, we both had a similar thesis, which is like in the investment world, you have to start embracing using data and information and technology to make smarter decisions. And how do you do that without changing the strategy that you have? And I think we now see it in public markets, but also private markets, that if you're going to invest in later stage companies, you need to leverage all the information that is out there. You need to know how are the apps performing, what's their digital strategy, what's the consumer transaction data look like? Like, how do you invest in a consumer company and not look at transaction data because you don't have a team that's technically capable of doing that or understanding what, vendors to be partnering with. And I think he recognized that from his investments that he was making in public companies and saying they're using data and technology. They're hiring some of the brightest out there. I need to do the same without changing my business, but just, enhancing our capabilities. And we set out on a 5-year path to really do that across equity, credit, structured credit, ventures, and then eventually crypto.
So it was a 5-year plan. You stayed there 5 years. You got into crypto. What was it I mean, you're doing a lot of credit stuff. You're talking to big funds. What was it about crypto that just said, fuck it, I'm like, love this? Because I remember, you didn't have the time to do all this stuff, but that's the rabbit hole you went down. What is it that got you excited?
I mean, I think we went down the rabbit hole in 2017. For me, it felt like almost like
So Dan went down it too?
Yeah, we went down it together. We didn't do as much for the fund at that point, but personally, I was, hooked. And I think it was, for me, it felt like the internet or the stock market, or how you kind of say like technology, the landscape's expanding. It felt like things were starting over, right? That was the ICO boom, but it just felt like companies were popping up and worth billions of dollars so quickly. And we were rebuilding the internet and, taking out a lot of the middleman that was sitting in the middle of, whether it was data or trading or whatever it was. And it fascinated me seeing how many smart people were diving into that.
That's what it is, right? Like the amount of smart people. And even though today it seems like everybody's in it, no one's in it. So it's like, in the amount of smart people, whether they leave cyber or whether they leave Goldman or trading or hedge funds, they all are at least taking. I mean, what I like to see is that it's just easy to work at Google and Facebook, and they made it easier, Apple, that pay you a lot. You get to yell at the boss. You get to talk on social media. You get to complain. Everybody's leaving that at a time when you thought they wouldn't. Obviously a lot of people are kidding themselves, but like a lot of the talent's leaving at a time where they could just make cush money elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are leaving for crypto also from the Wall Street banking world. It's, freeing them up. They can be who they want to be. They can learn. They can be on social media. They're less restricted if they want to invest in crypto or in the stock market.
True.
You got to remember that everybody that works on the banks and the hedge funds and everything, they can't do anything personally, right?
True.
Like, they're very limited in what they're allowed to do outside the office. I think crypto has shown people that, those restrictions are taken away, and that's enticing if you can, take that risk.
Especially if you know what you're doing. So now they have an advantage that they can't believe.
Right.
Yeah, so they speak a language that people in tech think they speak, but they don't understand how to really trade. So there's just going to be a lot of money switching hands here in this next phase of this. What part of crypto do you like the best?
I think for me, it's the picks and shovels. It's the infrastructure. It's the data. It's, you think of what Alpaca has built for the private markets for stocks and moving into crypto. It's that type of thing where we're going to have a ton of new businesses being built, and being that layer that everybody's building on top of, I think is really exciting.
So now you started a company, which is really exciting to me. How did that start? And tell me about it.
Yeah, so we have a phenomenal founder named Eric Witchen, who I had met when I was at Bloomberg right out of college. We'd always stayed close. He went on to work at Benzinga for Jason Raznick, who we're close friends with. And, I think we saw during COVID that people were investing in crypto and NFTs, sneakers and trading cards were booming. It was the whole collectibles move. And, I think people were fascinated with what you did with Rally Road. And I think what me and Eric and one of our other friends, Chris Camillo, really realized was we're doing all of these alternative investments, but there's no way to really track these investments, understand what they're really worth. There's so many different exchanges that are out there. If you think about it in the NFT space, besides OpenSea, there's dozens, if not hundreds now, of exchanges where these things are trading. And we said if you reimagined what Bloomberg would be today, but for collectibles, sneakers, trading cards, NFTs, everything that's physical, that's going digital, what would that data infrastructure layer look like? And then what would it look like if you built a media angle to that, and then you also built a terminal, right? So essentially it's what we learned at Bloomberg, but for these new asset classes, investing in things you're passionate about, investing in the NFT space, and building that data, really rich architecture so that insurance companies, for valuations at the end of the month, for vaults, for whoever wants to build on top of, you have that data layer. And then you have, the media for understanding what's going on in the world. And you also have the, the front end terminal. What would that look like? And, Eric's done a great job hiring a team globally, very decentralized during COVID. And, they're off to the races.
And is it fun watching, or do you miss doing the day-to-day? Because you haven't done the day-to-day of that. I mean, being a venture capitalist is an entrepreneur, but you don't have a team. We're partners. You don't have a team, and speed. It's a different type of speed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like it. I've done a lot of WorldQuant, we were 600 people. We had offices in, 20, 25 different locations around the world. Third Point, I had team in the US and in India. It's a lot managing a team. And like, as much as I love that, it's also nice to be able to focus on, the small team that we have and building and working with founders and sharing experiences and not having to do the managerial aspect of, having all those people reporting to you.
And if you could give your money, because now you're on all three sides. You worked inside a giant quant brain. You work for one of the, I don't know, best activists, what do you call it, constructivists slash, I don't know if he's a trader, but like trying everything, hedge fund, long, short, activist, constructivist, and now investing at different levels. What do you think has the most alpha, and what do you think, if you had to choose between, forgetting venture for the moment, so that's the first question, if you had to choose between quant and, like, you didn't have a choice to go back to venture and you had you were going to make one more move between quant or a hedge fund that's more artistic, what would it be?
I think I would work at a more, I guess you're calling it artistic, but fundamental hedge fund. But I would put my money on the quant side, like a WorldQuant. I think the consistent returns in the quant side is hard to match and hard to beat. I think it's more enjoyable and exciting being on the fundamental side, leveraging data and technology. Personally, I'm more excited to talk about companies and the markets and what's going on than the algorithms and the math side of a quantitative hedge fund.
And do you think the quantitative hedge fund just comes from machines not having emotion, and is therefore they're going to win more consistently over fear and greed? Is it as simple as that, or is it really about the programmers?
I think it's really about the team and it's managing the risk, building a market neutral portfolio, staying on top of leveraging the best data that's out there. So I think there's a lot of aspects to it. And I think WorldQuant's built, what they call like a factory, where you have researchers, you have programmers doing the execution, you have people building the systems, you have traders, you have a huge risk team. So it's really about the operations and process. What I learned a lot there was operations, process, having everything, really streamlined and efficient is important. Whereas, in the fundamental world, there's a lot more emotion that's involved. I think you can have really big years, but I think from a consistency standpoint, it's hard to beat the quants.
I mean, for me, it's a thrill that someone with your talent would choose us. I can understand, Gary's got that cachet, but, I'm a lunatic, so it's a big thrill for me. What is it about, you've only been here 3-4 months, but we've worked together for 10 years on and off on different things. What is it about the day-to-day that's different so far that you see? Because you don't really have a boss, and, we email as peers every minute or on chat or on Zoom calls. What is the difference? Or is it the same as being at Third Point?
I mean, I think it's just more freedom to think and do good work, right? There's no administrative things that need to be done. There's, running a large hedge fund, there's compliance operations, there's, we have hundreds, if not thousands of vendors we're working with. There's just a lot more meetings that are happening for the meeting's sake. Whereas I feel like at Social Leverage, we're spending our time with founders, talking about ideas, thinking about, deals we want to do, building a real business. So you take away a lot of the administrative and political aspects, which, is nice for me at this point.
Is Loeb considered crossover?
I would say it's crossover. I mean, I think it's one of the last hedge funds that's both doing it well, but that's also allowed to do everything, right? Equity credit, structured credit, they're doing ventures, they have crypto, private and public. I mean, it's very few, if any, other funds out there that can do that in one fund and do it successfully.
Because it's weird. He must have hundreds of positions on. Don't the best managers, well, I guess quants have, what's your take? If you were to go build a hedge fund because people just said, here's a couple $100 million, get started. It sounds like you would go quant, but do you err to having thousands of positions, or would you run a concentrated 12 position?
I think I would be concentrated, but I think I enjoy the private markets more, right? I think the public markets, I'd go concentrated, I'd invest in what I like and what I know, but I'd give my money to the quants as a hedge.
Interesting. That's awesome. And then what about what you're seeing so far that's exciting? Where do you see the biggest opportunities? Because you're fintech, NFT, crypto, Web3, but where do you see, someone who reads everything and has now talked to Gary and me every day and founders on the street in New York, and what areas of the country seem interesting?
I mean, areas of the country, I feel like it's everywhere now, right? I mean, we're talking to companies in Michigan and Utah. I mean, it doesn't really matter, I guess, where the teams are, because I feel like everything's kind of decentralized and we're not seeing even teams go back to the office or in some cases have an office. I still trend towards the Web3 stuff. I think companies that are thinking about leveraging Web3 in their technologies and how to really build what the future will look like. I mean, like you've said, the tech landscape is expanding so much and there's so many new companies, whether they're thinking about ticketing for NFTs or they're thinking like New Street and Eric about what does a collectibles industry look like and the data infrastructure. I think there's just tremendous opportunity. And then, I'm fascinated about what Yoshi's doing at Alpaca and all these companies that are building on top and what does the next Robinhood look like? And it's going to be completely different. And can we get a view into that future?
And do you like international or do you like U.S.? Like, what's if you had a choice, or you consider yourself open-minded to wherever the best people are?
I think I'm open-minded. I think I love traveling globally, but I feel like with COVID the last few years, nobody's really left the U.S. So I feel like my mindset is to meet companies in the U.S., but I find that I am always intrigued by what's happening outside the U.S., especially with crypto and the regulation that we have here.
And then what is the situation in New York? What do you feel about New York? Long-time New Yorker. So what's happening?
I mean, I think we're coming back. It's it's tough with COVID, with the subways and, the mask rules and, the restaurant scene has changed a lot. Every time we feel like, it's starting to come back, I think things changed. But at the same time, like, before COVID, I didn't have kids. Now I have kids. I think it's a different mindset. Living on the Upper West Side is different than living in Chelsea and Flatiron. I think a lot of talent has moved, right? Miami, Austin, Southern California. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what the next 5-10 years look like for New York.
And yeah, exactly. And so 2 under 2, they're going to be native to a different way that you were native. So what have you noticed so far? What are the things that just make them calm down?
I mean, I think what I'm realizing is like, when I was young, we had iPhones, but not till I was, high school, college, probably not even till college. I think phones and iPads are from the very beginning. There's so many, learning at an age of 2 is considered, something that we should be focused on. There's so many educational apps that are being built into the iPad. And, I think we were thinking about it as like in 15 years, are kids going to have resumes and are they going to be using LinkedIn to find a job, or is that all going to be different? It's going to be Web3 first. So I think that it's exciting seeing what the future is for kids with all of the technology and access that they're going to have to information. At the same time, how do you stay connected with also disconnecting? I think that's going to be the hardest piece.
Yeah, it's about turning the phone over, because the next one, we're going to all learn I'm learning to turn the phone off. We're doing long form podcasts. I'm using a desktop, so I don't work unless I'm sitting in front of a desktop. And it's not because I'm more efficient. It's just my eyes, my standing desk, screen size, being less interrupted. Podcast is better networking than tweets. Like all these things. But yet the internet's going to come for me again and be ubiquitous, meaning doesn't matter that you turn your phone over because it's going to be ever present.
Yeah, I feel like we have so much access to information. It's almost overload, right? Like we always are looking at our phones. It's like, how do you shut those off and just have time to think and come up with ideas? And I think COVID accelerated that because we didn't have interactions with people. And now, for me, it's exciting to get back and go to events and travel and see people and not look at the email for a little bit. And I think from my past world and the hedge fund world, you're hundreds, if not thousands of emails a day. It's refreshing to wake up to less than 10 emails in the morning.
Well, you've come over and you already have more process. So where do you define, and I'm all for process, but can you have both? Because, I won't take the affinity notes. And it's not because I'm stubborn. It's just like I got and I'm not because I'm crotchety, because I believe in it, but I don't think I'll ever use it either way. So how do you juggle old world? Like, how important is process?
I mean, listen, I also joined hedge funds that had no process and we had a bring process. I think
Huh.
things happen over time. The younger generation likes to use those tools, right? I think I use affinity notes because I can't remember what I did 10 minutes ago.
Correct.
So it's good for me to use the notes for myself. You and Gary read them and you're probably like, well, maybe half of it makes sense. But I think things evolve over time. I'm also a big believer is like more information you have, you look back at it 5, 10 years from now, it might be extremely valuable. So I think process is important, but I think you can't be too rigid.
And what do you read? Like, we have different interests. I mean, you understand fintech more than me. I'm more a consumer. So what do you read? Like, where do you get your flow?
I mean, I think I've become big into Twitter. I love reading people's newsletters. I've always consumed information and news from Bloomberg, probably because I started my career at Bloomberg. So I always had a Bloomberg terminal. It's funny to think this is the first time in, 15 years that I haven't logged into Bloomberg every time when I wake up. But I think over time I've, picked up a lot of the crypto newsletters and following the right people that are, writing interesting stuff, whether they're on the venture side or they're actually building and, just keeping up with all of the innovation that's happening.
We're friends with Ted Merz, so have we thought about it? And why hasn't Bloomberg come up with a venture capital terminal that's part of Bloomberg? Or is it the market not big enough yet?
I think that they probably have some private data there. I think, the winners in private data have probably been more of the pitch books of the world, which was acquired. But yeah, I think it's tough because getting that private information is so difficult. So besides the filings, you have to put together alternative data sets, which is, limited in itself.
Right. So most of it is just social networks, and which goes back to our point of Twitter. It's like the one company they shouldn't be selling their product to is Bloomberg. It's amazing because you're right. Like in a sense, it's about data, and Bloomberg could always get that data, and no one really has good data anyways on these private companies. So really, it's all about networks and chat, and so it's like I don't know.
Yeah,
If
I
they
mean,
could,
also, I think it's the, like you say, it's all about networks. Like if you think about how some of the disruptions happening in like the private expert networks, right? You see Tegas has brought a ton of transparency
right.
to the late private markets. It's fascinating to be able to use a product like that and see, 20 experts talk about, a late stage private company and really get some inner workings of how that company is doing, people's thoughts about it, the products and so forth. So I think that we'll have more, content on these private companies over time, and these great companies are making that accessible to the masses and building tools for, NLP to really consume the information quickly.
Oh, so in the end, Bloomberg there'll be an acquisition war amongst the FactSets and Reuters and Bloombergs for these Tegases and Tegas lookalikes, these expert networks.
I mean, I've got to think so because at the end of the day, data and content is the most valuable asset. And
Correct.
if these companies build up these war chests of, rich information, somebody's buy that. I would think we saw, AlphaSense start to dip their toes into acquiring some of these transcript companies. And I think, more and more of these companies are going to come out. But like a data set, it's going to take years to build a big treasure trove of this information.
Yeah, well, for us, Knut, myself, Tom, Gary, Don, it's, we had talked about it for a while. I know you and I had talked about it. I'm like, I don't know, man. We're small shop, but I'm so glad that we're thinking, we've expanded our horizons. Like, because it really is just the early days. There's so much you can do. Like, you're right. It's data, content, and then it's obviously networks, and then it's obviously filters because your time is everything. Those four things are so important going forward.
And the communities, right? I think if we've learned anything from Web3, these small communities are popping up everywhere. And
Good point.
NFTs have really shown us that. Discord has shown us that. And I think we're just scratching the surface because it's not easy to find this information without being part of these smaller groups.
And what is it about what they've learned over the years? Is it that's most important in these startups? Is it the founder? Is it the idea? Is it the TAM? What do you think?
I think it's the founder. I think the TAM can always expand. I think that they can expand what their vision is. I think you have to bet on the right people. The people have to understand that, there's the recruiting aspect, there's the raising money, there's the building great product. But I think the best founders can hire the best people, and they know when to allow their team to really, accelerate the company and take a step back and focus on the vision.
And if you had a choice, is New York the place, or like what other place of the country seem the most interesting?
I mean, I think I grew up in California. I think it's a matter of time before we move back west. I always like the warm weather. New York City winters are tough. Kids in the city is tough. I think I'd love to be in New York a few weeks a year. But I can't see not going to the warm weather long term.
Yeah, it's that natural turnover of New York, the winters. It takes a special type of person to keep putting up with it. Well, dude, it's fun to have another brain on the team, and I'm hoping that we can do this more often. You and I doing it every minute. So we had a formula, bounce ideas off with Tom and Gary. We have our monthly meetings. How has it been to be the new person in? Like Dawn, obviously, can get along with everybody. You get along with everybody. What's it like coming in?
I feel like it's been natural.
Have you done a good job integrating you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been natural. I think it's, you guys have a good process for not having a strict process. And at the same time, like, I've known all of you guys for, 10 plus years, if not more, as a investor, as partners we've done things with. So I feel like joining was not like joining a new job, right? It just felt natural.
All right, my man. We'll take care of the kids.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll see you out here soon. And let's keep cranking.
Alrighty. Thanks, guys.
K-Nut.
Howard!
So that picture you took with Matt was hilarious. So you got to meet him. You got sick, but you got to meet him.
I did get to meet him.
What do you think?
He's
Good
a great
fit for
guy.
us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's young. He's smart. I mean, he knows the biz.
Sneaky by us, not him. We overachieved.
You did great.
We had the Ross man, the Hoff man, and he lured away to be CEO. It's not easy to be independent, when everybody's got big ambitions, but I think Matt's got his own startup. He's got the 2 kids. He's in a good place to feel it's a tough racket, so independent, making these decisions to write checks with other people's money. I know a lot of people think it's easy to write checks with other people's money, but Matt's got all the, he's got all the gifts, and he knows how to be social and knows how to ask the right questions.
And he's happy. He's a happy guy.
Yeah, he was calm today, but man, he's a happy guy.
I know. Really, really,
really bubbly.
Like him as a person.
Yeah, big personality. So you are listening to Panic with Friends. I'd like to, I should be more panicked.
You're so calm.
But Social Leverage is kicking ass.
Yeah.
And our podcast is kicking ass.
Yep.
People love the music. They don't like me. They like Canute. They like the music. They like the sound. And they put up with me. And I'm talking less. I'm interrupting less because we have smart guests on. So we talk to investors, founders, sometimes my partners, venture capitalists, traders, writers, big thinkers, people that have seen the goal line, as they say in sports, cross the goal line, have a vision for what things look like and how things work. And we try and stay a few steps ahead. Now, you don't have to be years ahead here, as I keep saying. We're investing for profit and joy. Search my name, Howard Lindzen, on Apple, the internet, anywhere, Google, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Search Panic with Friends, or search my name. Subscribe, please. Click the button, subscribe. You won't have to do anything else. Once a week on Thursdays, you'll get an alert with our podcast. Thanks, Canute. Thanks, StockTwits. See everybody next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed